It was a gray Washington morning, the kind where the sky looked like concrete and the air carried whispers of secrets too heavy for sunlight. Inside the gleaming, cold halls of the FBI's Hoover building, Kash Patel, now the newly appointed director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation under President Donald Trump's second term, stood before the Strategic Operations Committee. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. He had waited years for this moment. A former national security prosecutor, former chief of staff to the Secretary of Defense, and a bulldog investigator during the Trump-Russia probe era, Kash had seen how deep the rot went. And now, with full authority, he was finally going to clean house, starting with a name that once made even top officials tremble: Hillary Rodham Clinton. "Kash," said Special Agent Melanie Reeds, handing him a sealed file thicker than a law textbook, "this is everything Langley dug up in the last 72 hours. You're going to want to see page 43. Patel nodded and opened it. His eyes moved over evidence photos, classified transcripts, offshore bank transactions, and then there it was, a decrypted memo dated back to 2015. Authored by a shadowy figure within the Clinton Global Initiative, it outlined a coordinated effort to launder foreign funds through humanitarian fronts, including payments from shady Ukrainian oligarchs and Gulf state donors, all tied to promises of diplomatic access and policy influence. Kash's hand gripped the file tightly. "They thought they buried this," he muttered. "They thought wrong." For years, Clinton had been the untouchable titan of the Democratic establishment. Between the email scandals, the Steele dossier, Uranium One, Benghazi, and the countless coincidences that left whistleblowers missing or silenced, the media had played the gatekeeper and federal institutions the protector. But this time, there was no more deep state shield. Patel slammed the file shut and turned to his team. "We move tonight. Full coordination with DOJ, IRS Criminal Division, and cybercrimes. I want simultaneous raids on all properties linked to CGI shell foundations. No more warning shots. This is a takedown." Melanie's eyes widened. "Are you sure? Going this hard, this fast, we're talking about the Clintons." He stared straight ahead. "Exactly." That evening, as dusk settled over the Potomac, black SUVs with tinted windows and FBI tactical teams swarmed properties in D.C., New York, and the Bahamas. Computers were seized. Phones were cloned. Storage lockers broken into. Safe houses emptied. And inside one Manhattan penthouse owned by a Clinton family associate, agents discovered something even more damning than money trails: a voice-recorded confession from a longtime insider detailing a 10-year operation of foreign bribes, quid pro quos, and removal of threats. And it didn't stop at Hillary. The names in the transcript were explosive: a former CIA deputy director, high-ranking media moguls, tech giants, and international bankers, all roped into a conspiracy to control narratives, elections, and global financial flows. The news was embargoed, but leaks were inevitable. Within 48 hours, hashtags like #Clinton Cartel and #Kash is coming were trending on X, formerly Twitter. Conservative networks lit up with speculation. Liberal networks tried to downplay the news until an unexpected voice went live on national television. "Good evening. I'm Tulsi Gabbard. And tonight, I'm breaking ranks with the Democratic Party." The camera zoomed in. "What I saw, what I now know, the American people deserve the truth. Hillary Clinton is not the leader we thought she was. She is, in fact, the architect of one of the greatest betrayals of public trust in our nation's history. The Clinton Cartel was no longer a conspiracy theory. It was a criminal enterprise unraveling fast. And Kash Patel had just fired the first missile." In a dimly lit conference room beneath FBI headquarters, Kash Patel stood before a wall covered in photos, documents, and red strings connecting names from Washington to Wall Street to foreign embassies. His inner circle of trusted agents, handpicked after months of loyalty checks, listened in tense silence. "Operation Clean Hand," he began, "is no longer just about Hillary. This is systemic. This is institutional. And if we pull this string any harder, the entire fabric of the establishment might tear apart." Special Agent Reeds chimed in. "We've got David Brock on surveillance. 2 burner phones traced back to CGI-linked accounts. His latest call? He was warning someone in Brussels." Kash paced. "They're panicking. Good. They know what's coming." The Clinton circle was notoriously fortified. Over the decades, it had grown into something far more intricate than most Americans realized. There were layers of loyalists, former State Department operatives, shadow donors, compromised journalists, NGO operatives posing as activists, all bound by shared secrets and mutual protection. But in the past week, that loyalty began to fracture. The first to flip was Laura Wilkins, a former CGI accountant turned federal witness after FBI agents raided her Miami home. Under pressure, she confessed to overseeing fraudulent financial reports and coordinating with a Swiss bank to mask foreign donations as domestic charity funds. She signed her statement under oath and named Hillary Clinton directly. She knew everything, Laura whispered during her deposition, voice shaking. Every dollar, every deal, every fake grant, it had to be approved by her or Cheryl Mills. That's how tight the loop was. The next to crack was Marcus Devane, a former DNC cybersecurity contractor with knowledge of internal communications scrubbed during the 2016 email scandal. After being detained by DOJ officials during a layover in Denver, Marcus offered something unexpected, an unaltered copy of the original Clinton email server data stored on a private blockchain backup he created. Just in case the truth ever mattered. Kash's team ran digital forensics on the files. The metadata proved damning email chains between Clinton and high-ranking officials not only discussing pay-to-play schemes but also orchestrating media narratives, sabotaging political opponents, including Bernie Sanders, and even coordinating international favors with classified intel. "We're past emails and missing phones," said Kash to the Attorney General during a late-night briefing. "This is espionage. This is treason." Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton herself was growing more erratic. Gone were the calm interviews and book-tour smiles. Inside her Chappaqua estate, she reportedly held emergency meetings with longtime aides, lawyers, and crisis managers. "Tell me Kash Patel doesn't have the Epstein ledger," she barked to a legal aide. "Tell me they didn't recover that server." Her lawyers assured her they were working on it, but the writing was on the wall. Donors were jumping ship. Foundations were suspending partnerships. Former allies like Rachel Maddow and Anderson Cooper were suddenly silent, avoiding even uttering her name on air. And most devastating of all, Bill Clinton had left for Dubai, citing health and privacy reasons. The shark smelled blood. On Capitol Hill, Republican senators began pushing for a special counsel to oversee the case, while moderate Democrats scrambled to distance themselves. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted that she was deeply concerned by the emerging evidence, calling for full transparency regardless of party affiliation. That same night, Tucker Carlson, back on air with a vengeance, ran a chilling segment. "We were called conspiracy theorists," he said, holding up one of the leaked financial memos. "Turns out the real conspiracy was the one operating inside our government all along. And now Kash Patel, a patriot who saw the rot from inside, is taking it apart piece by piece." Suddenly, this wasn't just a legal storm. It was the beginning of a political earthquake. And Hillary Clinton? She was now the eye of it. April 12, 2025. A day that would be seared into America's collective memory. At exactly 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the FBI's Digital Evidence Portal, in coordination with the Department of Justice, released the Clinton Files, a massive document dump containing over 35,000 files, emails, audio recordings, financial transactions, internal CGI memos, and signed testimonies. Redacted for sensitive intel but devastating nonetheless, the data was uploaded under a banner reading, "Operation Clean Hand, Phase 2, Transparency." The files painted a picture so clear, so irrefutable, that even the most skeptical Americans couldn't look away. One email thread from 2013, marked confidential, eyes only, showed Clinton directing her staff to funnel Qatari donations through the health branch to avoid IRS scrutiny. Another memo discussed a planned favor exchange with a Ukrainian energy firm seeking U.S. market entry in exchange for a $12 million speaking deal and family foundation support. But it wasn't just money. The documents confirmed something far worse: the weaponization of federal agencies. During her time as Secretary of State and beyond, Clinton had allegedly leveraged her influence to coordinate covert attacks against political opponents using the IRS, DOJ, and even elements within the NSA. Several names in the memos included familiar targets: General Michael Flynn, Senator Rand Paul, and conservative media executives. One audio file, chilling in its casual tone, featured a conversation between Clinton and a senior State Department official. "We're not running against Trump. We're running against the people who put him there. If that means digging through their lives or feeding something to the press, so be it. Nobody plays clean in this town. Least of all us." Within hours of the public drop, all hell broke loose. Cable news networks were forced to interrupt regular programming. NBC hesitated until one of their own correspondents, who had been named in the files for receiving pre-scripted talking points from Clinton's PR team, walked off the air mid-segment. Independent journalist Glenn Greenwald posted on X, The biggest political scandal of our time is unraveling in real time. The Clintons ran a global criminal empire, and our media helped them do it. Across the country, protests erupted. But these weren't partisan rallies. This was something else. In red states and blue, Americans stood shoulder to shoulder, not with Trump or Biden, but with truth. Hand-painted signs read, "Not left or right, just right and wrong. Clean house now. We deserve better." Even lifelong Democrats found themselves shaken. "I believed in her," said Marlene Bishop, a Clinton campaign volunteer from Philadelphia, on CNN. "I defended her when they called it corruption. But this is betrayal." And as the pressure mounted, former Clinton loyalists began flipping like dominoes. Cheryl Mills was the first. Clinton's longtime chief of staff, attorney, and enforcer, she was arrested at her D.C. home and taken into federal custody after leaked text messages showed her coordinating witness tampering. Sources close to the DOJ confirmed she was offered a deal, immunity, in exchange for testifying directly against Hillary Clinton. The next day, James Rubin, a former senior foreign policy advisor, was indicted for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. In a rare public statement from FBI Director Kash Patel, he addressed the nation on live TV. "What we're witnessing isn't just the downfall of a political dynasty. It's the exposure of a system that has failed the American people for far too long. My promise to this country is simple: no one is above the law. Not anymore." Back in Chappaqua, Hillary Clinton's estate was surrounded by a growing media swarm. Secret Service agents had restricted access. Rumors swirled that she was considering fleeing the country, perhaps to a non-extradition country like Qatar, where many of her foundation's mysterious donors resided. But inside, Hillary was no longer the confident, polished figure who once roamed the global stage. She was isolated, paranoid, and lashing out. "This is Trump's doing," she screamed at a staffer. "That little thug Patel is his puppet. I built nations, they're treating me like a criminal." Her voice echoed through the marble halls. But outside and across America, that's exactly what she was being treated as now. April 17, 2025, 6:32 a.m. The stillness of the early morning was shattered as black SUVs pulled up to the Clinton estate in Chappaqua, New York. Armed with a federal indictment and a sealed arrest warrant signed by a grand jury the night before, FBI tactical units, accompanied by U.S. Marshals, approached the gate with precision. Inside, Hillary Clinton was watching cable news when the doorbell rang. She already knew what it meant. Minutes later, the world watched in collective disbelief as the former Secretary of State and two-time presidential candidate was escorted out of her home in cuffs. She wore a beige coat, her hands bound in front of her, her face composed but pale. Cameras captured every second. News anchors fumbled over their words. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is history." The charges were staggering. Conspiracy to commit fraud against the United States. Money laundering. Obstruction of justice. Bribery of foreign officials. Illegal use of a charitable foundation for personal and political gain. Unlawful retention and dissemination of classified materials. Witness tampering. 12 counts in total, each carrying up to 20 years in federal prison. The Department of Justice, now under immense public scrutiny, made the indictment public. This indictment is not about politics. It is about accountability, read the opening statement. No American, no matter how powerful, should ever be immune from the law. At FBI headquarters, Kash Patel sat quietly in his office. He hadn't given a press conference. He hadn't smiled for the cameras. He didn't need to. His job wasn't done. More arrests were underway. 3 former Clinton Foundation board members, 1 ex-ambassador, and a retired Pentagon official were already in custody. Each had played a role in propping up the cartel of influence that had operated unchecked for over 2 decades. But perhaps the most shocking turn came when a former president finally broke his silence. Barack Obama, in a televised interview, distanced himself from the Clintons for the first time. "I didn't know everything. I'll admit that. But if what's being revealed is true, then justice must be served. This country cannot afford to protect those who abuse its institutions." It was a stunning blow, the final fracture in the Democratic establishment. As Clinton was arraigned in federal court in Manhattan, protests surged outside. But this time, they weren't in support of her. They were demanding a full purge of what had now been dubbed the Clinton Cartel. Chance of Cash was right, echoed through the streets. In court, Hillary's lawyers pushed back hard, calling the indictment a political witch hunt. But the presiding judge shut it down. The evidence is overwhelming. This court isn't interested in political theater. We are interested in the truth. Then came the bombshell that nobody, not even Kash Patel, had seen coming. Huma Abedin, Hillary's most trusted confidant and aide for over 20 years, flipped. She entered a plea deal just 48 hours after Clinton's arrest, handing over video and audio evidence of internal discussions that allegedly proved Clinton's full knowledge of foreign bribes, internal DNC manipulation, and more disturbingly, discussions about using intelligence assets to sabotage political enemies. In one video, Clinton could be heard saying, "We've got friends at Langley. If they think they can dig up dirt, we can bury them with it." The entire nation held its breath. Even late-night talk shows, long considered liberal strongholds, couldn't spin it. Stephen Colbert opened with a somber monologue. There comes a time when comedy takes a back seat to accountability. That time is now. Across the aisle, conservatives called for a full audit of the Clinton Foundation, suspension of all associated PACs, and a congressional review of how intelligence agencies were used against civilians during her tenure. For the first time in modern political history, the elites were falling. And at the center of it all stood one man, calm, relentless, and unshaken. Kash Patel, director of the FBI, had just brought the most powerful political dynasty in America to its knees. But as he reviewed the newest intelligence reports, he saw something that made him pause. Incoming encrypted traffic from offshore accounts mentions retaliation. He turned to his aide. "This isn't over." Huma Abedin, Hillary's most trusted confidant and aide for over 20 years, flipped. She entered a plea deal just 48 hours after Clinton's arrest, handing over video and audio evidence of internal discussions that allegedly proved Clinton's full knowledge of foreign bribes, internal DNC manipulation, and more disturbingly, discussions about using intelligence assets to sabotage political enemies. In one video, Clinton could be heard saying, "We've got friends at Langley. If they think they can dig up dirt, we can bury them with it." The entire nation held its breath. Even late-night talk shows, long considered liberal strongholds, couldn't spin it. Stephen Colbert opened with a somber monologue. There comes a time when comedy takes a back seat to accountability. That time is now. Across the aisle, conservatives called for a full audit of the Clinton Foundation, suspension of all associated PACs, and a congressional review of how intelligence agencies were used against civilians during her tenure. For the first time in modern political history, the elites were falling. And at the center of it all stood one man, calm, relentless, and unshaken. Kash Patel, director of the FBI, had just brought the most powerful political dynasty in America to its knees. But as he reviewed the newest intelligence reports, he saw something that made him pause. Incoming encrypted traffic from offshore accounts mentions retaliation. He turned to his aide. "This isn't over." Huma Abedin, Hillary's most trusted confidant and aide for over 20 years, flipped. She entered a plea deal just 48 hours after Clinton's arrest, handing over video and audio evidence of internal discussions that allegedly proved Clinton's full knowledge of foreign bribes, internal DNC manipulation, and more disturbingly, discussions about using intelligence assets to sabotage political enemies. In one video, Clinton could be heard saying, "We've got friends at Langley. If they think they can dig up dirt, we can bury them with it." The entire nation held its breath. Even late-night talk shows, long considered liberal strongholds, couldn't spin it. Stephen Colbert opened with a somber monologue. There comes a time when comedy takes a back seat to accountability. That time is now. Across the aisle, conservatives called for a full audit of the Clinton Foundation, suspension of all associated PACs, and a congressional review of how intelligence agencies were used against civilians during her tenure. For the first time in modern political history, the elites were falling. And at the center of it all stood one man, calm, relentless, and unshaken. Kash Patel, director of the FBI, had just brought the most powerful political dynasty in America to its knees. But as he reviewed the newest intelligence reports, he saw something that made him pause. Incoming encrypted traffic from offshore accounts mentions retaliation. He turned to his aide. "This isn't over." Huma Abedin, Hillary's most trusted confidant and aide for over 20 years, flipped. She entered a plea deal just 48 hours after Clinton's arrest, handing over video and audio evidence of internal discussions that allegedly proved Clinton's full knowledge of foreign bribes, internal DNC manipulation, and more disturbingly, discussions about using intelligence assets to sabotage political enemies. In one video, Clinton could be heard saying, "We've got friends at Langley. If they think they can dig up dirt, we can bury them with it." The entire nation held its breath. Even late-night talk shows, long considered liberal strongholds, couldn't spin it. Stephen Colbert opened with a somber monologue. There comes a time when comedy takes a back seat to accountability. That time is now. Across the aisle, conservatives called for a full audit of the Clinton Foundation, suspension of all associated PACs, and a congressional review of how intelligence agencies were used against civilians during her tenure. For the first time in modern political history, the elites were falling. And at the center of it all stood one man, calm, relentless, and unshaken. Kash Patel, director of the FBI, had just brought the most powerful political dynasty in America to its knees. But as he reviewed the newest intelligence reports, he saw something that made him pause. Incoming encrypted traffic from offshore accounts mentions retaliation. He turned to his aide. "This isn't over." April 22, 2025, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. In a closed-door session at Langley, Virginia, the CIA director handed Kash Patel a security brief stamped "Top Secret, Urgent." The intel confirmed Patel's worst fear, powerful remnants of the Clinton-era network, what some agents now dubbed the Shadow Circle, were still operational overseas, funneling money through backdoor intelligence contracts and quietly shifting assets into crypto-based accounts linked to ex-intelligence officers and corrupt foreign officials. These weren't just cronies. They were loyalists, individuals deeply embedded in global finance, intelligence, and diplomacy. Their goal? To retaliate. To survive. But Patel was ahead of them. Using intel gathered from Abedin's files, whistleblower data, and a surprise confession from a former NSA analyst who once worked under the Obama administration, Patel launched the final phase of Operation Clean Hand. This time, the target wasn't just Hillary, it was the Clinton empire itself. By April 25, over 200 bank accounts tied to shell organizations across Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg were frozen. These accounts had funneled nearly $1.4 billion through the Clinton Foundation over the last 15 years, masked under humanitarian aid and strategic consulting services. Simultaneously, joint raids between U.S. allies, including Interpol, MI6, and Israeli Mossad, seized dozens of hard drives and encrypted servers from Clinton-friendly operatives in London, Brussels, and Doha. Some of the data on these servers exposed deep collusion between the Clintons and international media networks to suppress stories, shape narratives, and destroy reputations of whistleblowers. Meanwhile, back in the United States, a congressional hearing was underway. Kash Patel sat before the House Oversight Committee, facing lawmakers from both parties. He opened his testimony with a calm, powerful statement. This investigation was never about vengeance. It was about restoring trust. The American people have been lied to, manipulated, and used as pawns in a game of global control. That game ends today. He laid out the timeline of deception, the flow of illicit funds, the quid pro quos, and the institutional decay that allowed a political machine to operate like a mafia family, unchallenged, protected, and enriched. The crowd watching from home was riveted. Even skeptics had to admit, Patel hadn't just uncovered a scandal, he had exposed a syndicate. Within 48 hours, a bipartisan Senate subcommittee voted unanimously to authorize a full federal dismantling of the Clinton Foundation, its affiliates, and all PACs and foreign offshoots under its umbrella. Hillary Clinton, now in federal custody, issued a single statement through her legal team. "I served this country with honor. I will not be the scapegoat for its broken system." But few believed her anymore.